Today, we're going to talk about a specific scenario for home buyers. If you're getting out of a home, but you want to pay off a lot of debt, you have a big debt that you want to pay down, use that equity towards it, but you're ready also to buy a new home. So, what's that process look like? How do you pay off that debt in between selling and buying? What's that process look like? What are the steps? What are the considerations you need to keep in mind? Bill Litton will break it down next. Welcome in the Smart Mortgage Show. I'm Ben George with Bill Litton at Cross Country Mortgage in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. Find us online, smartmortgageshow.com. So, Bill, today we're talking about debt, and I know debt's a big part of the process when you're buying a home. But this unique scenario of this debt you want to pay off after you've already had a home, you're in a home right now, you own it, you want to sell it, get into a new home. What's that process look like? So, this is an interesting kind of debt thing, but that's a big part of the discussion that you have with everybody, right? Debt is a huge number you got to pay attention
to. Overall, Ben, just to your point, I would consider us liability advisors.
Okay.
Because, the mortgage is the largest debt that most people will ever have, the largest liability. And we're always trying to figure out how does that fit into the overall financial plan? Because if you think about it, if we put you in we work together with the customer and we come to the idea that you can afford a mortgage that's $4,000 a month and you're approved for that. But now you're not able to save for retirement, right? That's not a good idea at all, because the mortgage could, and by the way, other things as well. Car loans, I see people with car loans that are $1,000, $1,500 a month, and their income really doesn't support it. And it causes them to not be able to invest wisely for the long term. So as a liability advisor, we want to make sure you can get in the house you want to get into and also meet those investment goals to, fund your retirement. So yeah, we're always looking at debt in a very analytical way to make sure that it fits your scenario and helps you or does not hurt you in reaching your goals.
All right, so let's talk about this specific scenario then. If you are in this position where obviously if you've been in a home, you probably experienced a nice little bump and a gain in equity on that home the last 4 or 5 years. So for someone that has debt, and we won't even have to get into the argument of whether or not you should just maintain that debt and use that money elsewhere, Bill. We'll scratch that part of the discussion. But for someone that wants to pay off that debt, it's going to give them peace of mind, whatever it is. They want to get that cloud out of the way, not hanging over them anymore. What's the process look like? Is this something where they have to find temporary housing and pay off that debt and then get the home? Can they roll that financing into their next mortgage? What should we be thinking about here if this is our goal?
So Ben, there's two scenarios where we see this happen. And so one scenario is where they absolutely have no choice, but they've got to use some of the net equity from the sale in their house to pay down the debt on the new loan or they won't qualify.
Okay.
The second scenario is it's their choice. They qualify with the debt. And then do they put more money down or do they pay off the debt? So the first scenario, to your point, if let's say that their debt to income ratio is over the limit, but they have a substantial amount of equity. So what we would recommend is when you sell your house, you're not going to realize the equity until the day of settlement, but we can actually pay the debt at the settlement table. So as long as their house is selling, let's say at 10 a.m., okay, and at that 10 a.m. settlement, all the money from that settlement is now wired to the new settlement. Let's say it's $200,000. For sake of example, let's say they put $100,000 into the new purchase down money and closing cost on the new purchase, and the extra 100 they're going to pay debts. Well, the title company into their bank account, the title company kind of acts as the bookkeeper. The title company is going to take that money and they're going to allocate it appropriately. And they're going to have payoffs for all of the debtors. And let's just say there's 10 debtors. They're going to write 10 checks. And as the lender, we're going to be comfortable because the title company is required, right? And we receive guarantees from them that they're going to act in accordance with our closing instructions. And our instructions are going to be that in order for them to qualify, all of these items need to be paid at settlement. So to your point, you don't need to find temporary housing in that case. You can do it all at once. It can be structured to where we're going to, as the lender, say, we're going to be okay with you buying the new house contingent upon you taking X amount of equity at the settlement table and paying off your debts.
So you can do it that way, whether or not that's a debt that you just choose to pay off or it's a debt that you need to pay off in order to qualify. Both scenarios work in that process.
Yeah, exactly. So in the first scenario, we were saying they absolutely had to do it or they wouldn't qualify. Now, the second scenario is a little bit different where we just might make recommendations that say, look, you could put the whole 200 into the house, but depending on where interest rates are, if all of your unsecured debt, if the average rate of all of that's 15%, then you'd be better off paying off all of the unsecured debt, right? And taking a larger mortgage and having potentially even a higher tax write-off, because the unsecured debt, you can't write off any of that interest. So you'd be better off paying off the high interest rate debt. You're going to increase your cash flows every month because that high interest rate debt has higher payments attached to it. And then the mortgage payment is going to be a little higher, but your overall monthly expenditures are going to be lower. And the additional mortgage debt you have is going to generate a little extra interest that you pay, but the interest can be tax deductible. So again, we would make those recommendations. It would be the customer's choice whether they wanted to do that or not, but we're always trying to look to help them maximize each dollar.
And I can't think of any examples here specifically to ask you about, but does it matter what kind of debt it is in this process? I don't know which debt's worse or which debt might carry more risk potentially in your eyes. But does it matter if someone wants to pay off $50,000 in debt, what kind of debt it is?
It does, only that I would say student loan debt historically can be drawn out. It can be sometimes forgiven. It can have low interest rates. So sometimes a credit card that's 0% for the first year and you're still in that first year and you do plan on paying it off before it starts accruing debt, and just watch the terms of those, because a lot of times if you're one day past the full year, the first year, now all of the interest for that first year gets accrued at once. But anything where the interest rate's low enough, sometimes car loans can be at 2%, and maybe we don't want to pay those off because that's really good, almost free money at that point. So we want to be careful that we're not, paying off 2% debt with 8% debt, right? We want to make sure that it's a trade-off where you're going to get a gain on your investment because you've invested in a lower interest rate situation.
All right, good stuff. Well, if you have debt to pay off, you're looking for ways to approach that with your mortgage, or look, you're just trying to figure out what options you have to get into that next home that you want to buy, Cross Country Mortgage can help you out with that. Go to smartmortgageshow.com. That's an easy way to learn more about this process, to get a better sense of what Bill and the team can do for you. And from there, you'll be able to schedule that time to sit down and kind of talk through this thing. And I know, Bill, this kind of initial meeting that you go through is about learning about debt and the full financial picture that somebody has and what their goals are for their home, right? To help them figure out what's going to be the best fit for them.
Yeah, exactly. And the really interesting thing about it is customizing these scenarios. No two scenarios are exactly alike. And sometimes, what might seem like the steadfast rule, there's exceptions to all of those rules. So we want to dig into your scenario specifically, talk it through, make sure that, you're making all the best decisions. So our consultation, our consultative, process helps to uncover all of those important characteristics.
All right. Well, if that's some help you need right now, go ahead and get in touch with Bill at Cross Country Mortgage. He'll be happy to help. But hopefully this kind of gives you some ideas of what you can do if you have debt that you want to pay off in between selling your current home and buying your next one. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe. We appreciate that support. And we'll talk to you again soon right here on the Smart Mortgage Show. This program is for informational purposes only. Please consult a qualified professional before taking any action. Bill Litton is a loan advisor and regional president with Cross Country Mortgage, NMLS number 147060.